Yeah, there's also like this weird way that medieval debunked science is being repackaged in the wellness world. Hikikomori, for those who don't know, are mostly men in Japan who are shut-ins. They don't leave their room for years, sometimes at a time. Their parents bring them food. They play video games. They're totally addicted to their screens. Japan is 10 years ahead of us in everything.
Yeah, food and fertility class.
Fast food tastes like food enough, but it's not food. And video games feel like problem solving and engaging, but it's really not doing those things. And he described it as this slack noose around his neck where he technically got all of the things fulfilled. He was talking to people, he was eating, he was alive in the world, but at this really not at what's the word I'm looking for? Like not at the level of actually living, but not enough that he would go and change it. Like it wasn't dire enough.
Would you like to know more?
Hi, everyone. We are so excited to have our favorite writer on the podcast, Suzy Weiss. She's with the Free Press. You can find her on Twitter/X at Suzy Weiss. And she has written some amazing pieces. We first discovered her through this mind-blowing article on Spoonies, but more recently, she wrote about a different type of kind of self-care culture that we thought would be really fun to discuss today, particularly referring to Hurkle-Durkle as a trending term, but also like bed rot and quiet quitting show up in the article as well.
Yeah.
We'd love to talk about this with you because there's so much going on here.
We're gonna get into Tradwives. Everyone should buckle up for a ride through the internet.
Wait, you had this great quote in there. Didn't you say something like Tradwives are the girl bosses of the home or something?
Tradwives are the girl bosses of they're not different.
They're
are just villainized women
100%.
Who are trying to get what they want, which is I thought what we all want, but I guess not.
Yeah, well, they're having it all.
Oh,
they're having it all in the home. Yeah.
If you go what you want. Well, it's so interesting the way that society is so politicized that every subculture has a team. And depending on what team you are in, that subculture is either an evil or good subculture from the perspective of each team.
Yeah, the hustlers versus the quiet quitters, and the Tradwives versus the soft girls. And yeah, there has to be this.
Yeah, it's actually almost odd when there are unteamified subcultures like MLMs. MLMs isn't explicitly a right or left thing. But if I think box shipping, when you were talking about hustlers, I'm like, oh, those are right-wing nut jobs. That's what people would say about them, right?
Drop shipping?
Yeah, drop shipping. Yeah, drop shipping. There's like a whole drop shipping culture.
Like Andrew Tate's University really fights for drop shipping, right?
They might, but a lot of things like that do. So it's very similar to MLMism. So, okay, obviously you have MLMs, which predominantly target women, but the ones that target men are typically not monetized through the traditional MLM model. It's more like a guru monetizes through very expensive courses. And then they try to target teaching people like actually how to start a company. But if you're going to teach at scale how to start a company, there's really only a few companies that work on that model. Drop shipping is one of them. Actually doing lectures yourself.
Oh, is drop shipping like MLM for men?
Yes, like MLM for men.
Wait, I have to read about this. I'm so excited. But I think it's like raw milk and it's like anti-vax. It's the middle of the horseshoe and it's the Rorschach test, like whatever in it.
But it's not as abusive as MLM because you can genuinely make a lot of money doing it if you do it right. But it is like MLM in that it forms like these cults of personality. And yeah. But
the whole vocabulary around it. Like the vocabulary around, hey girl, hey babe.
Yes.
I love that.
Oh my God. Hey, hon.
Yeah, hon.
Okay, let's go into, do you want to start with Hurkle-Durkle or Tradwives?
Yeah, can you define Hurkle-Durkle for our sage audience that probably has never heard this term before?
Yes, because your audience is smart and reads books, and I've never read a book. But Hurkle-Durkle is this 18th century Scottish term, and we could get into the whole like trend industrial complex, but basically it's like an update to bed rotting, which is an update to, I think, hygge, which is that there's
what is hygge
or hygge? It's like a Nordic Swedish word for getting cozy.
Okay.
And then there was like another term for staying in on a Friday night during like Norwegian winters, but it's like this umbrella term. It falls under self-care, but Hurkle-Durkle is just apparently this Scottish phrase from the 18th century that means staying in bed longer than you should. But of course, when you combine that with the internet and the algorithm, it turns into this rallying cry for people not to feel bad about pickling under their duvet cover all day, and Hurkle-Durkle, which is stay in bed, but of course means stay on your phone and allow a stream of garbage to go directly into your eyeballs and hold still while TikTok infiltrates your brain.
Yep.
So this actually reminds me of one of my favorite misinterpretations of a historic context. So people
Yeah.
on the show know we're very into like religious systems and stuff like that. And we were talking with a friend of ours, and they're like, "Oh," we were like, "How's your diet going?" And they're like, "Oh, I came up with this amazing new diet system that's based on ancient Eastern philosophy." And I was like, "Oh no, what do you think?" I knew things were about to be bad. No, they're like, "Well, I learned about this concept called Wu Wei." Are you familiar with Wu Wei? Okay, so it's a fairly complicated concept. It is where you are elevating an aesthetic reaction to your environment to a moral status. It's often described as like in a river moving with the water to get to your destination. Go
It's
into
like
it
if you've read anything by the Church of the Subgenius, it strikes me as like their concept of slack, which
it's
is
very similar to the concept
you
of slack.
achieve a lot, but through a sort of natural elegance where you're not fighting against nature and society and everything. Instead, you are, like in Aikido, using your enemy's opponent against them, or at least in your favor.
So, but she heard of this concept.
How is this a diet?
Yeah, what she thought it meant is eat whatever you want whenever you feel like it.
Oh,
and
yeah,
some
what she
Intuitive
thought,
eating.
yeah, was basically
Intuitive eating.
just don't try to do anything. Just eat whatever you want. And then she immediately started eating a ton of junk food.
And she gained weight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's the same with these Hurkle-Durkle and concepts like this. Is people are trying to elevate base hedonism to a moral system of superiority
Yeah.
over other individuals, which is really interesting.
Yeah, there's also like this weird way that medieval debunked science is being repackaged in the wellness world. So I have a friend who gave birth, or my friend was talking to her friend who gave birth, and she had this Wu midwife who was like essentially trying to balance her 4 humors.
Oh no.
And it was after a little bit of questioning, it was like, wait, what's the thing with the phlegm? But this was like the new age thing. But anyway, yes, it is like a misused Scottish concept. I don't know if Scottish people stayed in bed really late in the 18th century. I assume if they did, it was because they had just gotten back from like a land war. So I don't know.
Well,
if
I don't know. I've read some books from England, and they do say the Scots were a lazy people.
I could also see though, like it
sorry,
being really used in a derogatory fashion, like a
like he
mother or a
Hurkle-Durkle.
wife being like, you can't Hurkle-Durkle all day, that kind of thing.
Totally. There is like a Yiddish, like the sound of it matches what it is, like an onomatopoeia or something.
Yeah.
That I appreciate. But the Hurkle-Durkle at this point, it's old news online, but it
But
is in
hold on,
line with the trend. Mhm.
before you go further, one thing I want to elevate here, which I think is really interesting, is essentially people are rediscovering old forms of hedonism, then building
Yeah.
sort of an aesthetic theology around them. And by this, what I mean is in a modern context, default hedonism is status hedonism, i.e., it's go on trips so that you can take pictures and show how much better you are than everyone else. It's hedonism tied to affirmation from peer groups or
Promiscuity.
status seeking. Yeah. Whereas in a traditional context, Hurkle-Durkle hedonism is just searching out pleasure, which can often be achieved fairly inexpensively in an individual's life. And I do think that there is some value in at least recognizing this as an individual, that I pointed out on previous podcasts, actually maxing out individual hedonism stats when you disassociate from affirmation. It's pretty easy. Once you learn to cook for yourself, you can make like easily 4 or 5 tier star like chef meals that are perfectly optimized for your taste buds, that have access to spices that people like fought and died over historically. So easily.
There are 4 apps you could download to make your life like you would be like Genghis Khan level pleasure. You know what I mean? You can order sex, you can order the groceries, you can order the most gorgeous linen sheets. I mean, you don't have to leave your house and you're like a sultan.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of my favorites was one of my very wealthy friends complained about being wealthy in this era. We've mentioned this on another show because he's, I just can't get anything that middle class people couldn't get. Like I used to be able to call a restaurant and have them deliver food to my house. Now what? Uber like Eats does that for everyone. I used to have access to foods that other people don't have access to. I don't have that anymore. I used to be able to on demand have servants. Now everyone basically has TaskRabbit. I used to like, what do I have? I had access to maybe a band that could come play for me, but now everyone has music players. He's
Yeah, and
just
like
like,
the
I
most
don't.
gorgeous, like high fidelity systems. Yeah, like flatness and convenience culture has in this weird way turned us all into kings while spiritually impoverishing us all. So you might as well stay in bed.
The one thing that's interesting to me is in the article, you point out that a lot of this is potentially in a backlash or contrast to hustle culture and this feeling like it's a combination of response to girl boss and hustle culture and try, fight, fight. And then this realization that we're not necessarily going to get boomer level rewards for the
Right.
work we do.
It's okay. Having it all was a lie. So in response, I will do nothing.
I will have nothing and do
Yeah.
nothing. Yeah.
Weird reaction.
Do you think that this was a reaction, or do you think that they just happened to be at the same time and people reacting the like in different ways to the same thing? And do you notice any patterns between the types of influencers or people online who go for one answer or another?
I think there's a few ways this happened to take your question in parts. I think a big part of this and what I get into in the article is that this is the logical conclusion of self-care culture.
Hmm.
I do think like the era of wellness is ending. It's, I don't know, like yoga pants don't count as clothes anymore, which like I'm happy about. But
Thank goodness.
self-care as it became like kind of mass produced, commercialized, whatever you want to call it, began to just mean anything. It meant going to a yoga class. It meant skipping the yoga class and watching TV.
So
It
true.
meant spending a lot of money on food. It meant making your own food at home and making sure there were no seed oils in it. It meant going to a protest. It meant hanging out with your friends. It just is a word that means
Yeah.
nothing. And so, like, the end part of it is just, I will be sedentary and do nothing. And that is also self-care. I will do nothing for myself, as opposed to, I guess the ideal of self-care is I will curate this beautiful life. So I see it, what Malcolm said, it's an update on an ancient form of hedonism, but I also see it as like the death rattle of wellness culture. And we're going to enter into whatever's coming next. I forget the other part of your question.
No,
Oh,
no.
the types of influencers who
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah. How does this sort? Because there's still a lot of people who are heavy hustle, and there's still a lot of people who are heavy soft life.
Yeah, I don't know if it falls into a type. I think this is something that was interesting is I keep getting fed all of these like Christian influencers and Christian podcasters.
Mhm.
I don't know why. They're really weird and interesting, but they were a few Christian girls on a podcast talking about how when you want to go out or when you made plans to go out and you don't want to go out and you're really tempted to cancel the plans. This is like an annoying meme online. Oh, nothing like sex is great, but if you ever canceled plans at the last minute or whatever. And these girls framed it as the devil was telling you to cancel the plans. And maybe if you went out, that was that like God had something in store for you. Maybe you were going to meet your husband that day or whatever. I think while I think that is like a weird way to frame it, and I don't think there's like a demon who's stay in bed so comfy, cozy, there is something a little bit like feeding into this base impulse
Yeah.
of staying in bed, and like going out will like lead to more activity in your life.
I think it
It's true.
shows the value of these old religious systems. This is something we're always installing on this podcast. I'm like, many of these religious systems actually had utility to them. And here you're seeing that utility in action. They have created a framing that prevents them from falling into these. And I should be clear, this form of hedonism creates a spiral, which makes your life worse.
Right.
Where I would have a different hypothesis, I don't not think we're at the end of wellness culture. I think we're at a transformational moment in wellness culture where, and you mentioned this in the article, as I remember, is that this is reminiscent of Hikikomori culture
Right.
in Japan, and that what we might be seeing is an evolution of a form of American Hikikomoridom, which I can see becoming incredibly popular among Gen Alpha.
Hikikomori, for those who don't know, are mostly men in Japan who are shut-ins. They don't leave their room for years, sometimes at a time. Their parents bring them food. They play video games. They're totally addicted to their screens. Japan is 10 years ahead of us in everything.
Yeah, and fertility class and everything. Yeah, and I think that we will get a form of American Hikikomoridom, and I think what will lead it, in reference to our last talk about spoonies, is an elevation of agoraphobia as a thing of status within certain elements of online culture, and that they will then feel emotionally rewarded and affirmed for leading in to their agoraphobia, which will elevate the actual amount of agoraphobia they're feeling, which makes it much easier to end up locked in your house for 10 years. And
Yeah.
we've got an entire generation that started their lives in COVID and stuff like that, first job, stuff like that. So they got started on the tracks of staying inside all the time. And then
Yeah.
they built their friend networks on Discord. They're getting their needs fulfilled, and they desperately now need to justify why they're making these decisions that are clearly against their best interest. And now there's communities that affirm that, like the anti-natalists and the Ethelism,
Right.
that say, actually, you're doing a good thing by doing nothing with your life and being a drain on society, so long as you don't contribute to keeping that society going.
There's a few things I want to pick up on. One is you talked about getting your needs fulfilled. I interviewed an incel for a story about for the 10th year anniversary of Tinder, who
Oh,
described,
wow.
yeah, he was in England. He was really interesting. And he described how like fast food tastes like food enough, but it's not food. And video games feel like problem solving and engaging, but it's really not doing those things. And he described it as this slack noose around his neck where he technically got all of the things fulfilled. He was talking to people, he was eating, he was alive in the world, but at this really not at, what's the word I'm looking for? Like not at the level of actually living, but not enough that he would go and change it. Like it wasn't dire enough. And I thought that was really interesting. And
It's like he's living in a simulated version of a human life.
right.
We have created the things that we need. We don't need to go in VR to live a simulated life. We can already have simulated love, simulated accomplishments, simulated adventures, and simulated food.
But I would argue that is VR. That is like a virtual, it's not reality.
Yeah, that is, yeah. When I think the mistake we made, and this is something I realized about when I first met Malcolm, he just assumed that all this would become a big issue when brain computer interface was a thing, like when we were like literally plugged in. But somehow, like with just dumb screens and laptops and computers, like we are there already, fully integrated.
And that's what you keep bringing up, which I think is really interesting, these ancient concepts like Wu Wei, or and people trying to bring those into the modern era where it's, wait, it doesn't work when the food is like hyper palatable and extra salty. And similarly with Hurkle-Durkle, I'm Jewish, we have Shabbat, you are not allowed to work, you must rest. So I think people would be like, oh, that's like Hurkle-Durkle. And it's like, no, if you're living like a Jewish life, you are working in such a way where you need the rest. And Shabbat actually isn't about isolating yourself. You're made to convene with your community, with your family, have meals together. So I think people take these ancient concepts and use them to justify this like ultimately pleasure-seeking attitude. And it's like this
involves like a lot of fasting, more or less. There's so many things you can't do.
Right, exactly.
Oh, that's crazy.
Well, now get into the Tradwives part of this conversation.
Oh yeah. So Tradwives. Are you a Tradwife, Simone? Is that
We
is that
call
what-
her a Tradwife in some of the video titles to get clicks because she looks
Yeah.
like one. But
Yeah,
I
you
don't
do
think
look
you
like
are
one.
one by most traditional. Well, so a lot of people call what we
I
do
don't know.
as
I
trad
cook the meals
or
and I
like
clean inside.
technotrad, which is a
Technotrad or
form-
neotrad?
Yeah, technotrad.
Or you're
Rad trad.
Trad.
Radtrad's kind of rad.
Well, we'll see what they converge on as a name for it, but it's not overly trad. Like we're right now really excited about these AI toys we're getting for our kids so that they have somebody smart to talk with, but we're going to put them in their old toys and reprogram them to think that they are the kid's old teddy bear, but now they have an imaginary, that's not trad in a traditional context, but then you dress like a medieval peasant. Yeah,
Just
talk
to confuse
about
people.
Tradwives, because we talk about this a lot on the show as well. I don't think it's a holistically positive trend. I know that you would frame it as such, but I think one of the big problems with Tradwives is women begin to define the aesthetic of Tradwife as the reason, as the heuristic they use to make decisions and judge whether or not they're living a good life. And that's a very bad, they're like, yes, my husband may not be happy with the decisions I'm making, but I am following this aesthetic correctly. Therefore, I am a good wife or a good partner, right?
Well, and I think we have gripes with the way that many people define tradwifery, and that We think that the true trad is the corporate family where everyone works, including the kids, and everyone kind of shares the burden.
Oh, interesting.
Whereas
Yeah.
a lot of people who go to tradwifery, they're working, obviously, they're managing a household, but they're doing it in the modern age where we have dishwashers and washing machines. And it's not the same to manage a household and have that be your career.
Well, I'd also point out that think about this in the 8 passengers context, right? With the 8 passenger situation, you had a woman who in part identified as a tradwife to an extent, but then because the aesthetic of tradwifery was her moral system, because she was a Mormon, but she was not like this is how it works. This is how it infiltrates religious communities. She identified more as a tradwife than as a Mormon, more as a trad mom than as a Mormon, and because
more of a trad mom influencer. No,
yeah, right. No, but because of that, when then she's well, if I'm a trad mom, right, and that is what this aesthetic is morality. Where do trad moms compete within the hierarchy in terms of how they're different from non-trad moms? Well, it's how strict they are with their kids, how strict they are about how their kids engage with pornography. Yeah, and then she began to spin like virtue spiral on these particular topics to the point where she ended up committing real and pretty severe abuse of her children.
Yes, this was crazy. It was so funny. I was talking about this with my cousins at Shabbat dinner. I think the overall trend of tradwives is just an interesting case study because it's where the theory of feminism of women should be able to do with it whatever they want crashes in to the feeling like, well, not like that. Let's do whatever you want, but it better look like this. It better not look like that. So it's like these kind of these values that are in tension of I need this woman to want agency, but she needs to want it herself.
Have you heard of a taken in hand marriage?
No, what is that?
Okay. So I've got to point you to this because this could be an interesting story. So taken in hand relationships are a concept within a relationship where the woman is it's basically a 24/7 slave dom relationship, but done within the context of traditionalism and a monogamous marriage, but also understanding it definitely came out of the BDSM community. So people who are familiar with a 24/7 slave relationship, this is when a woman often lives as a man's in a 24/7 sexual role play scenario. Well, in a taken in hand relationship, they are doing that, but with the aesthetic of a traditional wife.
Yeah. So instead of like with Gorian relationships where they were going in this dynamic off of a sci-fi universe, they're going off of like the 1950s aesthetic of traditional marriage.
Yes. And where these women want to be spanked when they make mistakes. They want to be like open hand slapped when they say something stupid. And it is interesting to me, this recontextualization of, I think, a stereotype of the worst kind of tradwife relationship built into a BDSM relationship for the satisfaction of women.
Yeah, it's like feminist, but super not.
We just shouldn't have ever gotten the right to vote.
Yeah,
and then
everything went wrong. Everything.
Literally,
I want to say
crazy.
Like women should have the right to vote because like my ancestors fought for that and everything like that. Like they worked. But then I look at who would be elected to office if women didn't have the right to vote. And I'm like, but functionally, the country would be economically healthier and safer.
Oh my God, there was that amazing Grimes thing. It's what do you like about the patriarchy? It's like roads.
Yeah. Wait, did he say that?
She said that. It was an interview, and I'm into the patriarchy. I really like the roads. I really like the infrastructure. It was just fun. Yeah, are tradwives supporting the patriarchy? Are they subverting the patriarchy because they're choosing it themselves?
No, I think that they're subverting it. I think that tradwives are like horrifying parasites often.
Yeah.
The idea, as Simone pointed out, that there was ever a long period in history where your average wife could afford to not work and spend 24/7 looking after the kids. This is a historical fantasy because people are basing their assumptions about what historical marriages were like based on Hollywood from the 1950s. So there was a short period in American history from about the 1910s to 1970s where this was an aspirational lifestyle among the common people, but it was never really the norm, except like maybe like right after World War II when we had that enormous economic explosion in America.
Among very wealthy people.
But didn't the housewives in the 50s like go berserk and then they started
they basically did,
yeah.
But
they had that because they had the washing machine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now women are have tricked guys into thinking they're living this conservative relationship when they're living like, I don't know, like a harem lady would in an old Islamic palace, but without the work, just like the raising of a few kids. And I've seen these women who like stop. I have seen Tradwives stop after 3 kids because they said it was too much work and they had a live-in childcare.
Well,
and
and we see if you look at stay-at-home girlfriend videos online, and
Oh my
presumably
God,
these
or
are
stay-at-home daughters, professional.
yes,
I love them.
where it's like they're not they may do some laundry, they may clean up dishes and film themselves doing it, but they are also completely, this is my expensive latte that I'm not having. This is me working out. It's a very indulgent life. So yeah,
Yeah,
that bothers
and somehow we've gotten to the place where you're a trad wife if you make like a buffalo chicken pizza from scratch, which just feels like beside the point. But anyway, I kind of love that they explode heads. I love that the girl bosses exploded heads.
Yes.
And I think all of these people are in opposition to the self-care regime, whatever we're going to call it, that tells you that the best thing you could do is whatever you are doing for yourself, whatever that means.
Do we understand that one of your next pieces is going to be about the next stage, the non-self-care, the self-destruction?
Oh, the unwellness influencers?
The unwellness influencers?
Yes, yeah. Well, it's not my piece. I'm editing it. I don't know if you've read Freya India. She has this great Substack called
No, we
Girls.
met her last November. She's super cool.
She's so cool. And I was like, I need to bring in the big gun for this one. So she's doing a deep dive into unwellness influencers and they're, I guess maybe they're the opposite of Tradwives. We need some sort of visual chart to chart all of these
I think
different
Ayla is the
characters.
opposite of a Tradwife.
Ayla is the opposite of a Tradwife. I saw she was getting into it about surrogacy on Twitter today. I was interested in that. You guys, you're pro surrogacy.
Yeah, it's not scalable, but we were like, yeah, go for it.
Allowing it. I prefer artificial wombs or Xeno pregnancies.
What's Xeno pregnancy?
Xeno pregnancies is using other animals to carry human fetuses, but genetically altering them so that they creating a chimera so it has a human womb or
So
something.
we're more freakish than
we're more.
Ayla's a Tradwife.
You're like surrogacy. That's crazy.
Surrogacy? What? Come on, that's unsustainable. I can't farm human women, at least legally anymore in the U.S., but I can farm cows.
Yeah.
And you go to you wouldn't do it with cows. You do it with a capybara or something like that. That's more closely related to us. I was having a long call about this earlier today about how to make this real because I'm very excited about the potentiality of the mass production of children. A lot of people are horrified by so we are tradwifey to an extent, but we also want to, culturally speaking, win, which I think requires some deviations where trad culture is breaking down, which brings me to a question. Are you going to be a trad wife? And in what ways are you not going to be a trad wife?
Oh, I think anyone who gets married is doing a trad thing. Like, I think there's a big reflex, I think, especially among my contemporaries who are like, I'm getting married, but it's going to be different. And you're wearing a white dress. You're doing the thing. You got a sparkly thing on your finger. That's cool. That's fine. Like, it's okay to want a thing that many other people want. It's annoying to me to reframe it as not that traditional thing. I think every wife is a trad wife. So in that way, yes, I hope to be a trad wife. I bake bread every Shabbat.
Nope.
Oh
That's
no.
confirmed. You bake bread.
No. I just have to hide my décolletage for my modesty. For my husband. But no, I'd like to have a lot of kids, but I also really like to work and write. And everyone wants a life where they could do both.
A lifestyle that some of our friends have gone into, which is is open to you, so you might consider it, is I call it secular Orthodox Judaism, where they are not like theologically that into it, but they follow all the rules really strictly and
Postmodern Orthodox.
Yeah.
Yeah. That I think I am like been thinking lately more about like communal living, especially all 3 of my sisters had kids in the last 2 years. And I see how my middle sisters who live where my parents live in Pittsburgh it's just like this kibbutz where it's like in and out and this kid and that kid. And there's just something so incredible about it. Yeah. Maybe one day, maybe I'll be like Simone on the eve of number 4, hopefully.
Right?
God willing.
No, I hope. Or we'll have our big artificial womb factory and you can just,
you can just
pick one up.
It's fine.
Yeah, just pick one up. By the way, we're not close to this technology. I am joking about this for our audience's edification. Don't go off and say they're growing children
in like pigs.
in their backyard.
They're
Yeah.
cute rodents. I'm sure there will be this whole status thing of, yeah, well, you grew in a human and humans are gross, whereas I grew in a super cute capybara, so it's fine.
Wait, but I think are womb transplants a thing or not a thing?
Yes, there has been at least the first woman to successfully have a baby after receiving a full uterine transplant has taken place. So there's at least one case of it that like we had a gestationally functional womb transfer, which is something I think about a lot because I'm like terrified. I get my C-section this Thursday and I'm like, I don't want to lose it. I don't want to lose it. So if I do lose it, I'm going to be like, can I get a new one? Can I get a new one? We'll see. Fingers crossed.
You gotta remember when the most controversial thing was the death boards. What were they called?
Oh yeah, death panels.
Death panels.
Yeah.
That was like the craziest thing. And now we're
Yeah.
talking about God knows what. Who's in line for the first womb transplant? Probably the most natalist among us.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see. It's a weird world. I do think the story of reproduction, breeding, IVF regret, birth control, getting off birth control, the world of fertility toxicity, testosterone numbers going down. That is what I'm focused on, I think, for this next couple months, because I think it's a really rich subject.
You should talk with Raw Egg Nationalist if you haven't already.
Who?
Raw Egg Nationalist?
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. Yeah. I follow him on Twitter. He's really interesting.
We can introduce you. He's been on our show before.
Yeah, no, he has like a font of great research. He'll email us like, here, this study, I think you'll like it. And whoa, like he finds really good stuff. So he'll be a great informant.
Okay, cool. Because I'm also like raw eggs and like the status of the egg as like the perfect food, the evil food, cholesterol, the white's good, egg whites, white. Like you can follow what we think of like fertility in a way through the story of how we regard eggs and milk.
That's good.
And like we're out of the alt milk, soy milk era, which
maybe
was
renegade raw milk now.
You guys are raw milkers.
No.
No, God, no.
Oh, you're not?
Yeah. No, but like that's the new political stuff.
Right when I think I got you guys pinned down.
No, we are speed running life. A lot of people are like, the things you do are really like unhealthy a lot of the time. And it's, but we're not life extensionists or anything. I just want to live long enough to give my kids a good life and get the tasks that I'm working on done.
Oh, you're like get the 2-gallon whole milk and get in the car. We're going home. You're not doing like the boutique. Let's drive away.
Oh no, we go to one of those bulk stores and we just get like
BJ's. Pretty much all our food comes from BJ's and then goes in a chest freezer.
But in our district where I'm running for office, there is definitely a big theme about raw. Like this farmer tried to sell raw milk and they stopped him.
Oh yeah, because you're in Pennsylvania with a lot of Amish and Mennonite communities. I'm from Pennsylvania.
We have a lot of eggs we have chickens at our house as we gave them out at the last party, but we're not like
so beautiful
chicken supremacists. We're chickens as an aesthetic. I don't actually think we're making our health that much better by having our own chickens.
It helps me deal with the anxiety of the food that the kids always don't eat, because then I just feed it to the chickens and then I feed the eggs to the kids and then it's just the circle of life.
There you go. It's a circle of life.
It's good. Yeah. But good. Okay, we're going to make some intros for you. Thank you so much for talking about this.
Fun.
Yeah.
I can't wait for your next article.
We would love you to come on. Like every time you do a piece, if you want to come on and talk about it, just let us know.
You're so sweet. You gave me so many ideas. Drop shipping at the MLM for men is really that's gonna be fun for me.
Ethelism, you need to go deep on. That's the one that no one has done. It is so fascinating.
What is it?
Okay, Ethelism. It's life spelled backwards ism. You can look up our Ethelism for the subreddit on the subject.
Okay.
It is a movement that is an extreme form of anti-natalism that wants to erase all life on the planet. So not just get rid of humanity, but ensure that sentient life never evolves again on planet Earth, because they think that sentient life is an intrinsic evil. And it's a pretty big movement now.
So it's like pro-mass shootings, I would assume.
Yeah, kind of. So they're about 7 times the size of the pronatalist movement, to give you an idea of like size of this movement. And they are absolutely insane. And I think that they're going to be an increasingly big thing as pronatalism picks up steam, because then people have to justify how they're not bad people. And so they come up with these moral frameworks like negative utilitarianism to justify their means.